Good evening from our headquarters in Kyiv. This is the Sunday show at Hromadske International, the only prime-time show explaining Eastern European geopolitical storm in English, and I am Natalia.
And I'm Josh Kavensky, a reporter at the Kyiv Post. Tonight we'll discuss Brexit's impact on Ukraine and its parallels with Ukraine's own relationship to the EU. We'll go into depth on the increasing violations of the Minsk agreement in Donbas. We're going to interview returned hostage from Russia, Hennadiy Afanasyev, and we're going to delve into a new law that will allow women to legally serve in combat positions in the Ukrainian army.
And also, I, as always, encourage you to download our podcast on Mixcloud, so you can listen our best interviews and shows, but please watch our stories on our webpage on the YouTube channel. So here is the Mixcloud, and also go to the en.hromadske.ua to read the stories, to watch the best video clips. So we'll be back in a second. Ukraine.
Yes, so the United Kingdom voted last week to leave the European Union, which set off a whole range of political uncertainty in the UK and also added more questions about Ukraine's own EU aspirations. I think there's a B-roll we can show about the voting that went on Brexit, but certain aspects of the campaign leading up to the vote, in a sense, they mimicked Ukrainian politics. There were aspects it was more appealing to emotion. It wasn't necessarily as truthful as maybe people would have expected from a developed Western democracy.
So yeah, and now we see that since that vote, it has become evident that the Leave campaign lacked a plan in case of success, and both of the country's main political parties have been thrown into chaos. The vote, largely motivated by fear over the immigration, has further dampened also Ukraine's hopes, both for short-term visa-free travel to the EU and for the long-term relations, because we still don't know what would happen to the European Union.
Right.
But what we've done as well during the show, we talked to Peter Pomerantsev, who is the fellow at the Legatum Institute, but besides he is a writer and publicist who lives in Britain, but explored this part of the world, Russia and Ukraine, and knows a lot about media. So basically the questions we asked, there are some similarities between what's happening in Ukraine, in Russia, with the media, and what happened to the United Kingdom, despite they have the best media ever, the best education system. So here is our interview with Peter Pomerantsev. In Ukraine, we always thought that, we have populism, but if you have good papers, good newspapers, good media, like BBC, and you have the best education in worldwide, that things couldn't happen, that people would have more conscious decision. You research a lot, not just media in Ukraine or in Russia. So how do you think, how you see that from this referendum and what happened with Brexit from this perspective?
Well, there's several things. Firstly, this tendency towards away from facts and towards pure emotion is happening across the world. It's more extreme in Ukraine, where it's part of a security dimension, but it's happening in America. It's happening across Europe. It's hardly
in Ukraine or in Russia.
The way information is structured now. So people can construct their own echo chambers, their own little bubbles online. So, in that sense, it's not unusual that people just sort of live in separate worlds nowadays. And we see very clearly, by the way the voting went, that people and whole communities voted a certain way. What was very interesting, they were all on the BBC, but what was interesting was that both were essentially, they weren't arguing in a way. They were actually doing two different narratives. One was an economic, rational argument, we'll get in trouble. The other one was all about emotion and identity. They weren't arguing with each other. They were just in parallel. And there were more people at the end of the day who were drawn to the emotional identity narrative, not the economic one. So it wasn't that they were they weren't even arguing about the facts. They weren't really debating. There was like two different channels, and you could choose which channel you wanted.
There is this issue with kind of this relativity and the balance, kind of a forced balance when you present a couple of points of view without really clear distinction what is fact and what is not. And that said that in a way, the British media failed to explain to the people what is really happening after the referendum. Would you share this sentiment? Would you share this idea?
There is definitely a problem with the BBC approach where you put, even if the other side is talking mad rubbish, you still have to put them on. The journalists do push back against that. But the fact that they've been on already legitimizes them. We all know that from studies of media and communications, that it doesn't matter whether you push back. It's just enough having the lie on. So there's definitely that. So the BBC, the same way it legitimizes the Russian point of view, it also legitimized really quite bizarre assumptions, especially from the Brexit camp. But let's also remember, we're also exaggerating a lot. So there's that. But really, there's something. I mean, all these media things are definitely in play. And as Britain moves forward, or England, because Scotland will probably leave now, they're going to, just as in Ukraine, there's this priority of finding connections to, people in Donbas, people in Kharkiv, who live in a separate media bubble or a separate bubble. Now there's also going to be that effort to reach out across these divides. So in a way, the sort of the challenges are very similar. But look, there's something very much bigger going on as well, which is a choice between a kind of globalization based on cosmopolitanism, on immigration from different parts of the world, and another form of globalization, which is the one that most of Brexit intellectuals pursue, which is a globalization based on identity blocks. So they're not saying Britain or England should leave globalization. They just say it should be with Australia, New Zealand, Canada, other countries like that. What they're saying is we don't have anything in common with Spain. So they're trying to fuse identity and globalization much the same way as some ideas of Muslim globalization, that would create a Muslim kind of faith-based international financial system, and the same as Putin's Eurasian Union, which was also an attempt to create an identity-based globalization. The identity-based globalization doesn't make much sense financially or rationally, but it does have much more emotional resonance.
How do you see the further, relations of the UK, which is somehow lost and confused itself, to the European Union, to Russia, to Ukraine, to the whole this Russian-European conflict and what's happening here?
Well, listen, we've just seen. Look, I'm not sure it's going to be the UK, to be honest. I think it's going to be England, but let's say it's even the UK. We've seen the UK basically turn very inward, over the last few years. In terms of foreign policy, the EU doesn't have a foreign policy. The UK always pursued its own one, and that is traditionally quite hawkish on Russia. But increasingly, the UK doesn't really want to play foreign policy roles anymore. They just want to, trade with other people who look and sound like them and try to escape, modernity.
The war against Russia-backed separatists in Ukraine's east has seen sharp escalations over the past few weeks, with violations of the Minsk agreement that number in the hundreds. Numerous Ukrainian soldiers have been killed in the fighting, much of which have occurred around the Donetsk suburb of Avdiivka.
Yeah, so we should really clarify that it's definitely not something which we had experienced a couple of years ago or a year ago, but it's still the most severe violation within the last year, which is taking place for the last 2 months. And that was confirmed by our own correspondent. So our colleague Nastya Stanko has traveled to Avdiivka. It's a town just really opposite Donetsk, and this is the hottest spot in the whole front line today. So please watch this report and we'll discuss it later with the experts.
Це зараз по нам фігачать чи наші?
Це везде. По-хорошому бронік взяти, да?
Да, вы так не горячитесь, оденьте броники.
Так, я 2 здесь беру, ты там 2 бери.
Я вижу, что ты работал. Стушки 3, потушки 2. Я понял, прием. Принят, зараз будет. Я тебе, правильно? Правильно, работаешь.
А це де все зараз? Це промка чи щось інше?
Буду на дачу.
Малої дачі? Сідай.
Військові це називають дискотекою. Це близько проходить Авдіївки, це з зенітної установки стріляють, як бачиш.
Все, спускайтесь. Бо зараз не те саме.
І там буде дуже нескучно.
Сейчас мы определим, что там это. Пошли через нас, мужики. Здравствуйте. Добрый вечер. Вы нас не ждали, мы приперлись.
То ви нас не ждали, мабуть.
Ну, таке буває. 121. Саушка.
Вітя прийшов, помістив, ушов.
Сау 122. Вітя, а чого тобі там ходити, хлопці?
Та наблюдаємо за безпілотниками двоє.
Ну і що? Ну що ви наблюдаєте?
Давай сюда. Так, всі вниз. Освободіть місце.
Ближе.
Там планшет,
Чутко по нам.
Прикривайте двері там, наверху.
Може, двері закриємо?
Так, в першу чергу спокійно всі.
Это 122 миномет.
Примерно во сколько было это попадание?
Период с 10 до пол 11. К нам сюда больше десятка прилетело. Ну еще ж бомбили по соседям. Повезло, она глубоко вошла. Из-за того мало осколков разлетелось. Ну, скоріше всього, що це була ствольна артилерія, тому що дуже швидко снаряди долітали. От ці вчора, що били, по нам конкретно, це все ствольно було. Дуже швидко долітало.
So that's what Hromadske correspondent could see with their own eyes, and then you could. But also in Donetsk region, the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission recorded a similarly high number of ceasefire violations compared to the previous reporting period. In Luhansk region, there were fewer violations, but still. We also have to remind that these days there were the sanctions against Russia. They were prolonged till the end of the January next year, 2017. So more or less it would be like that for a couple of months there won't be any more talks about Minsk as it was during the last months, but still we see some development. So we have here in this studio Mykhailo Samus, who is from who is a deputy director of the Center of Army Conversion and Disarmament Studies. Thanks a lot for being with us.
Good evening.
And the general question is, what's happening? Can we really put into the context what is happening within the last couple of months in the front line? What does it all mean?
Actually, we should remember that we have full-scale war with Russia for more than 2 years. Actually, the war started just first green little man from Russia stepped on the Ukrainian territory in Crimea. And from that time, we have really full-scale war, but with hybrid nature. And it means that different instruments we're using with military, indirect information, and other meanings. So if we're talking about the now situation in Donbas, it means that different instruments Putin used before didn't work. So
you're saying that, I mean, the cause of the violence might be to achieve a more political end. It might be to achieve something else besides just taking territory in a traditional sense.
Yeah, you know, when we see how Russia using the hybrid instruments, we always trying to understand military means it's just one of them. So if they trying to make a pressure, for example, for Western partners, they always using this military means to show to West that, you see, Kyiv, they didn't complete the Minsk commitments, and that's why you see the people die in Donbas region.
But really, Alexei, we're really showing this. This is a Ukrainian. This source is from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission, that there was 546 explosion. There were 3 times denials of the access to monitors. In some way, we also know that from another map, and this is the Ukrainian agency said that there was these attacks against Ukrainian army, but we also know that, of course, the Ukrainian army shoots back. In this studio, every Sunday for almost 2 years, we're also discussing the roots of this war. What we want to understand, what's happening exactly now? You know, why there is this increase probably, and is there any significant push to take new territory by either of sides?
You know, even half a year ago, we made some forecasts that especially July and August will be very dangerous from the understanding and regarding the new military offensive operation from Russian side, because if sanctions were prolonged, and
has it happened?
Yeah, it happened. And if we understand that in September will be parliament elections in Russia, so for Putin it's nice time to show some maybe some victories, in the same time to make a pressure on Western partners. So actually it couldn't be some new territories. It couldn't be some real offensive operations, but to show that Russia could win, for example, for example, on Mariupol direction. It's very, very important for Russians, as we know, the corridor for Crimea, and maybe they will check the readiness of Ukrainian army to defend this territory, and maybe try to make some offensive attacks.
And do you think that would be an offensive? I mean, how far would that offensive go? Would it just be artillery strikes on Mariupol, or would it mean actually advancing into the city and actually trying to?
We could predict that maybe in August could be some real offensive operations, maybe to provoke Ukrainians.
Basing on what? If you predict, on what data? What makes you predict?
It's just open source of analysis, of course, but you know, when we see the Russians don't have any success on political means, on the diplomatic sense, they don't have any success in, let's say, informational war, because to be honest, they still on the propaganda level, they. Of course, they will use stuff like Brexit or something like this, but in reality, Ukrainian theater for Putin now, it's not very successful.
But have you really data about some kind of a new? We see this very complicated map for a foreigner, and you know, you see that there are some, you know, the violation on this front line near Donetsk. Of course, as I said, we have to put it in the context. It's not something we had like exactly a year ago, so it's different kind of shooting. But do you have the information about the new territories gained by either of the sides, or like movement, and that this kind of a front line is changing to some extent?
Yeah, we have information that, you know, you remember this last happening and close to Debaltsevo, when, yeah, it was different information from both sides, that it was Ukrainian offensive operations, it was provocation from Ukrainian side, it was provocation from then the Donbas occupied forces, but Russian occupied forces. But in reality, what we see and what we could say about the general preparations for offensive, Russians building new division in the western flank. It's not actually
you mean
on Donbas,
on the Russian territory?
On Russian territory, but it's closer to Voronezh and Smolensk. They build in the first tank army and 20th army and making it stronger and stronger.
And how long would it take to mobilize them if they wanted to bring them into?
Actually, they're using existing units from Far East, from Ural and such territories. I mean, they pushing units from the deeper Russia to front line.
But when we listen to the foreign politics talks, all this geopolitics, which also we discussed a lot in this studio, not just that, there was also talk that Russia at this stage probably is also willing that the sanctions are lifted, so there would be some compromise. We don't know, it wouldn't happen in the near future. But we also would like to bring the one quote of Hennadiy Afanasyev, who is the head of the security group in the Minsk talks. He was the head of military in Ukraine, the head of the Security Council.
Or Prime Minister, I think.
And by the way, he really insisted in talk to Hromadske that there is no really military way to overtake Mariupol and to put this corridor to Crimea, just because within these 2 years it was strengthened to the particular extent. But let's listen.
The most difficult thing for public opinion is a perception that we should not guide by an approach of everything and immediately, and not all or nothing, but patiently, step by step, fight for what we need, in the political, territorial, military aspects. And there is a real reason why it cannot be solved. If we have the right behavior towards our international coalition partners, we will sort out the mess at home, we will give the armed forces everything that they need, our diplomacy will be powerful, the issue can be solved. Not a month, not a year. It would not be resolved quickly, but I am convinced that Ukraine will absolutely come towards solving the problem. Maybe some compromises are not very pleasant. All the conflicts, there are 220 in the world. We discovered it with the UN Security Council. No one from either side was satisfied. Someone should compromise something. There are things which we cannot compromise, though. Territory, sovereignty, status. There cannot be a compromise. But a compromise may be tactical. And this is a boring, nervous routine with insults, with tricks. This is work.
And so we listened to Yevhen Marchuk, and what he said that, there is anyways, there should be some kind of compromise, and the Minsk agreement couldn't be rolled back anyway, having to understand what is the stance of Russia. So what is your view on that? Could really Ukraine gain militarily at this period, with these conditions, with the Minsk there, with the whole, diplomacy trying to work according to this scheme?
I rather remember about the international scenery now and international background, and why actually it was a pressure before July by Russia on Ukraine to start this election process. I mean, regarding the Minsk agreement, because everybody understands it. In September, it will be a new political season started in the United States, in Germany, in Russia, in everywhere. And we need to understand that after the summer, it will be new period for all of us, actually. And all of this contest for Minsk, we need to understand from the links with international and especially weakness of European Union regarding the acting by Russia. If we're speaking about the military or diplomatic acts or steps by Ukraine, it will be not very favorable for Ukraine to act now, and Russia understands it absolutely clear that next half of year will be maybe the last period for Russia for open to change and to do what they want, because nobody could predict what will happen in the United States. It's very interesting. Even inside of the United States,
nobody knows what's going to happen. But I mean, with this new political reality that you're talking about, I mean, what would a potential compromise look like for Ukraine? what would Ukraine have to give up in order to reach a maybe settlement with Russia to end the conflict?
You know, in Minsk agreement, we have no actually compromising from the Ukrainian side. I mean, if you're talking about the withdrawing of Russian forces, close the border, and all of order and law by Ukraine in this territory, and we understand that Russia never will allow us to do it. So if we're talking about this Minsk agreement, it's a great document, but it was great instruments. It's normal traditional instruments to solve conflicts. But Russian logic to make election and after this to make a peacekeeping operation or close border, it's against a logic. So we could say that in this framework, we don't have any compromises at all to change something.
Okay, it was, thanks a lot. It was Mykhailo Samus, who is a deputy director from Center of Army Conversion and Disarmament, but we'll follow with the topic because this week we're also looking on Friday to the huge event which would be NATO summit in Warsaw. So we are looking forward what will happen there. There would be the head of the states, and we're really curious, would there be any coherent defense plan for Eastern Europe? We know there are plans about the Baltics and Poland. So we talked during the lecture in Kyiv, which Hromadske has hosted with Edward Lucas, a senior editor of The Economist and an expert on security. During that lecture, we also asked about what we could expect from this summit. So please watch.
If you treat Russia as an enemy, then maybe one day Russia will become an enemy. And it will not help the security of the frontline states if we go down that road. And I said, trouble is, I think Russia's already gone down that road. It went down that road several years ago, and you will not make this problem go away by shutting your eyes to it. Anyway, what a lot has changed. I remember in 2007, the Poles went to NATO, and they said, we're really worried now, and we're a big country, so, you know, listen to us. We need some plans. We do not have even the rudimentary contingency plans to defend Poland and the Baltic states against Russia. And they were told, and this is a military secret, but it was in The Economist, so I can tell you, they were told, we can't make Russia part of our threat assessment, and therefore we can't make plans against Russia. We can make Belarus part of our threat assessment, and so you can have some plans for defending Poland against an attack by Belarus and perhaps some unspecified Belarusian allies. And that was the best the Poles could get, and that was Poland with Radek Sikorski as defense minister, and a pretty heavy-hitting country with a heavy-hitting minister. And for the Baltic states, nothing. And that changed thanks to the Obama administration. And it's very fashionable to criticize Obama as a disastrous president, the worst since Jimmy Carter. Many things you can say about him, but it was he who flicked that switch in 2008. He said, I don't get it. We have plans to defend Norway, we have plans to defend Turkey, we have plans to defend Portugal. We don't have plans to defend the only countries that might actually be attacked. And that's got to change. And so we got another military secret, which we had in The Economist, I can tell you. We got the Eagle Guardian reinforcement plans to the Baltic states. Very basic, basically saying to the Poles, here's the deal. You put the best third of your army in the Baltic states to defend them, and when we get round to it, we'll send some troops to defend you. So nice to the Baltics, not quite so good from a Polish point of view, but they went along with it because it was better than nothing. But now that's been upgraded. We now have real reinforcement plans. Real plans to get troops into the Baltics. We have the very rapid reaction force, we have the NATO response force, we have NATO force integration units, and we have exercises. It was completely taboo to have any sort of, you could have minesweeping exercises in the Baltic Sea where you practiced looking for World War II mines, but anything else might offend the Russians, so don't do it. Well, since then we've had the Steadfast Jazz exercise in Poland, and now we've got Anaconda 16. This is sending a very serious message to the Russians. Is it enough? No. But it's an enormous shift for NATO. It's a really, really big deal. Territorial defense is now NATO's #1 priority. And I'm really strongly against people saying NATO isn't doing anything. Yeah, that's playing into the Russians' hands. Can NATO do more? Yes. Will it do more at the alliance, the summit in Warsaw in July? Yes, there's some more stuff that will come out. We should be encouraging it. And I want to see a standing defence plan. And we need to do a lot more on all the non-military stuff. We need to do more on information warfare. We need to do more on cyber. We need to do more on economics. And I'll get onto that a bit later on. But I don't think anyone can doubt that NATO is going in the right direction. Now, that's no great comfort for Ukrainians and Moldovans and Georgians who are not in NATO. But I would rather have, it's still better, I think, to have NATO functioning as a defence alliance as not. It acts as a deterrent and encourages also the integration of non-NATO countries into what NATO is doing. It's really interesting the way we are seeing Sweden and Finland taking part in NATO exercises. And I think there's plenty of potential also to have Ukrainian forces taking part as well, and indeed they do.
What is the first one thing to watch out from the Warsaw summit, which would be the NATO summit in July, early July? What we should take care, what would be the indicator that things are moving?
It's a bit geeky, but it's about whether we have a standing defence plan. That if we fight, if there's a military conflict and it's fought only in the Baltics, then it's really, we never get there in time. Heavy armour from America, heavy weapons from the West. It's kept in places like Norway, which is great for the Cold War, less good for defending Latvia. And when we do war games, the problem is the Baltic states are quite small, and the Russians get to the coast really quickly, and then it's a fait accompli. NATO makes its decisions quite slowly, and that's quite a difficult problem. That changes if we have what we had during the Cold War, which was a standing defence plan, which means if you attack any part of NATO anywhere, all of NATO attacks you everywhere. Now, I think that's still quite controversial in NATO, but if we can get there, that's a very big deterrent. The Russians then think we aren't worried about little green men. We put our little green men in Latvia, and suddenly we have mines blocking our harbours in Vladivostok and Murmansk and Novorossiysk. And we see American cruise missiles landing all over Russia. Now, I'm not sure what the political will is to do that, but having the plan would be good. And the other thing is pre-authorization. By the time the North Atlantic Council meets, it's already too late. We have air policing in the Baltic states. They don't refer to Brussels or Mons before they take off. They take off as soon as someone crosses, Russian planes approach the airspace. We need to have a lot of political pre-authorization for SACEUR, the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe. So when he sees something he doesn't like from his intelligence, he just says, right guys, we're deploying. And within hours, you have thousands of other NATO forces in the Baltic. That would be really good.
Prisoner Hennadiy Afanasyev, who's 25 years old, was returned to Ukraine from Russia along with Yuri Salashenko last month. Prisoners still remain across the Russian Federation. I think there's a map we can show you of that. There are a total of around 26 of them, if we're not mistaken, here at Hromadske. But in any case, there are prisoners remaining all across the Russian Federation. Many of them were taken from Crimea. Others were taken during the Donbas. They were taken in many different ways. And I think, Natalia, you also got to interview Afanasyev this past week in English, which is, I know, a meaningful thing for you.
That's what I would like to say, that Hennadiy Afanasyev had been arrested in May 2014 in Crimea. Mm-hmm. He was the youngest, and his story is incredible because he has undergone very severe tortures, and that forced him to testimony against the innocent people.
Right.
He lived through that for more than a year, and last summer, while he was still in prison, he said in the court, which was a very brave thing, to say that I have undergone tortures. It was still while he was a Russian prisoner. Mm-hmm. He was very scared to do so. He didn't know what would happen to him if he had done so. Now he's back, and we really sat down and talked to him about this very hard and difficult experience. He's living in Kyiv. He moved to Kyiv. His home in Crimea had to be abandoned. And please watch that, what Hennadiy said. Yes, he speaks English, but as he said, for 767 days he had no chance to speak the language, and it's a very difficult topic to talk, so please follow this very, very honest testimony about what had happened to him.
It was very suddenly. I was on parade of Victory Day, and suddenly on the main street, a lot of people in the civil clothes, they just attacked me, and they began beating me on in my stomach, on my head, and they just brought me on the floor, and I can see only some really big guys with guns and some journalists with cameras. They make some stories, and it's the last what I saw over there. They put the bag on my head. They bring me to the car, just brought me in the car, and they sat on me, and we drive somewhere. We are going to the forest, and I will dig for myself grave. Yeah, yes, and they will kill me if I will not give the testimonies for myself.
Did you know Oleg Sentsov and Sasha Kolchenko, who more or less were named to be a part of the group where you belong to?
Indeed, they even not asking me about Kolchenko, but about Sentsov they asking a lot. They really needed that man. They are looking for him, and then they want to put him in the prison. About Kolchenko, they began to speak about 5 or 6 days.
And did you know Oleg and Sasha?
No, I didn't know them at all. I knew that Oleg Sentsov, that he is director, and I watched his film. And then they brought me to FSB building, where they began to beaten me and torture us. It's going on 10 days. Around 10
These people
days.
from FSB, from where they were, what they told you?
They were from North Caucasus. They
said you. Did they say it to you?
Yes, they said about it. They spoken a lot. The job in North Caucasus. Among first 5 days, they just beaten me in my stomach, in my head. That it was funny for them, because they smile a lot, and they even just ask me about anything. They just beaten me, but I keep silent. And when they bring me to my prison for first time, over there I couldn't sleep, I couldn't use toilet paper, I had any food. It was like they punish me. They want to make me pain. They want to make me scared, and I really thought about suicide when I were over there in that prison. And on the 6 days when they raped me, they began put mask on my head, gas mask on my head, and they, when I lose breathing, lose my mind, they open that mask and they spoiled some poison, and everything from my stomach, it going from my mouth, and
you vomit, yeah.
And I should to drink it all, and it's going to inside me, and I could breathe, and I began to lose my mind again, and it happened again and again, and and even then they didn't ask me for anything, but sometimes they said, you should make your signatures in the papers, or you will die in your own
vomiting.
And I put my signature. I thought that it will be a finish for me with torture, but in the evening when I was in a temporary prison, they came to my cameras and said that I should to give testimonies about Kolchenko and Sentsov. And then began really very scared tortures. They bring me to the FSB on the second floor, and then they put on my genitals wires and began to bite me by electricity. It was very hard to didn't lose mind, to keep silent, to not cry, to not make tears from eye, because they looked on me and smiled. I couldn't to feel it anymore, and I put the signatures on guys who really didn't make anything in Crimea, who not grilled. But they have any evidence on guys, and they want that I'm going to the deal with them. It will be very good on the Russian court if the evidence make a deal with prosecutors. My mother, she's director of touristic agency, and near to her agency, she put a statement of liberty, and that man from FSB from Moscow, they said that something can happen with your mother. She can, her car can crash, or we can put her in prison because she is spy of America, and we will do everything with her what we doing now with you. It's their words, and I really believe them that they can do it.
That they will do the same with her. That
yes, that they can do everything with everybody, because it's Soviet Union forces. It's their methods. They killed and they grab people and do with them everything they want. They undressed me and put on the floor. Then they took some iron tools. It was very warm. They took it near my skin, and they told what will be with my genitals when they put this warm iron thing in me.
Today is the big day for the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian female. So since today, Ukrainian female are formally legalized at the combat position in the Ukrainian army. So far, we have 50,000 female in the Ukrainian army. There are 2,000 of them officers. But before, they couldn't have this combat position like mortar commander or sniper or somebody who works with the landlines or like machine gunner or the head of the commander of the reconnaissance group. You know, before, though Ukrainian female were serving in the army, even if they were fighting during this war, they were, you know, meant to be tailors. They had this kind of household position.
Right. So legally, they weren't actually having combat positions. They were acting within non-combat roles. But tonight we have somebody who can talk about this in depth, an expert, Natalia Karbowska of the Ukrainian Women's Fund, is here joining us tonight to talk about this new order that was just issued very recently by the Ministry of Defense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. It's a big achievement. We think it's a big achievement. And it took us, actually, I wanted to tell how everything started. It started in December last year when women activists presented the project called Invisible Battalion. And the idea was it was initiated by Maria Berlinska, by Tamara Marcenyuk, other sociologists, and later supported by UN Women in Ukraine. So the idea was to study how women feel in the Ukrainian army, how many of them are there, what positions they occupy. And we found out that there are many women in the army, and they are doing real work there, but officially they are registered as cooks, as receptionists.
And so what does that mean for them? Do they get paid less? Are they deprived of certain benefits? Or? Well,
first of all, yes, they get paid less. Then if something happens, then of course they will not get any social security because, well, officially she was somewhere in the kitchen, how she could get injured or something. So realistically, women were in a very bad position in the army. So we started the project, we started talking to the Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Informational Policy. We created the Invisible Battalion strategy, and this helped us to get heard at the Ministry of Defense, and as a result, I think there is this order. But the order, I think this is just the beginning. The fight is not won yet, because the order is only about lower-level military personnel, which means that women officers, still we don't know what's happening there. We don't know. I'm sure there are other orders which are about the positions that women officers can occupy, but they have a secret code at the Ministry of Defense, so we don't know which positions women officers can occupy, actually.
So far, we know that there were females fighting currently in the Eastern Front line, but still in this document, there are currently 85 professions. And how special is that with this, because some of them, they are still commanders. That's something new. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate more on that?
Yes, well, definitely there is some of these positions. Well, if you compare the old order and the new one, clearly there is a huge difference. Women now can be, well, that's a funny story. According to the old order, women were not able to be drivers. Women were not able to be even interpreters. Well, I'm not even talking about commanders. So now definitely there is a change, and they can occupy these positions. But also, I think it's important to think about the next steps, whether women have proper access to education in the military of Ukraine to be promoted to these positions. And this is something that we should take into account and work more, I think.
And I mean, currently, though, how many officers are there? We have a statistic, female officers in the Ukrainian army. I think we have a statistic here saying it's around 2,000.
2,000, yes.
That's true.
Yes.
And I mean, how far do you think that could grow?
But I should really say that significant change really happened because of unfortunate situation because of war. So we would like you really to show you the piece, how happened that so many female are really joining the army. There are two girls from Luhansk. I personally met them way before the war. It was still in April 2014. They were, helping with the food. And then later we found them fighting in the front line as volunteers. So please watch this video.
Луганский Майдан явление совершенно естественное. Это даже не способ выразить свою позицию по отношению к Евросоюзу, либо внешнеэкономическое, так сказать. Это просто способ был сохранить Украину в Луганске, скорее так.
Зимой это все еще было на волне именно Евромайдана, скорее вот именно это вот киевское движение, оно как бы перетекало плавно, вот отголоски, скажем так, его были в Луганске.
Поддержка Луганска,
да.
Киева.
А уже ближе к весне это у нас, можно сказать, было совершенно другое какое-то движение, оно действительно было уже именно за сохранение целостности Украины, то есть пришли люди, которые даже первоначально не поддерживали Майдан, я знаю, они уже вот вышли именно за Украину, и все это плавно трансформировалось именно в борьбу за то, чтобы остаться хотя бы тем, кем мы были до этого. Не то, что там изменить что-то. Хотя это, конечно, все же была надежда, но уже хотелось хотя бы просто остаться в составе Украины. Пробовали себя в волонтерской деятельности. Поняли, что это не совсем наше. Хотелось каких-то более активных действий.
Ближе к дому.
Да, ближе в Луганск. Все мечтали скорее вернуться.
Вы хотели попасть на фронт?
Да.
Да.
Прямо в окопы?
Прямо туда. Первыми войти в Луганск.
На данный момент у нас есть блокпосты, которые находятся непосредственно уже на границе, так сказать, в буферной зоне. Например, как пост Карбонит, Боровское. То есть конкретно от поста Карбонит 5 километров до Первомайска, до оккупированной территории постоянные обстрелы происходят до затишья. И также разведывательные диверсионные группы действуют непосредственно возле постов наших.
Ты только что вернулась из Карбонита.
Да, пару дней
назад. Ты стояла на этом самом блокпосту, так?
Да.
Сколько ты там провела времени?
До ротации месяц и после 2 месяца. Без перерывов и выходных.
Если уже зайдем в Луганск, все, будет подконтрольной украинской власти, то я переключусь обратно на информационную деятельность. Все-таки это очень нужно, потому что мозги промыты у людей. И тут работы непочатый край. Когда еще уезжали, вот эта вот волна началась, когда все наши активисты стали уезжать из Луганска, многие сразу сказали, что они не вернутся в Луганск. Мне бы хотелось, чтобы... Я верю, что все-таки Луганск станет обратно украинским, и что все-таки люди вернутся, потому что они должны понимать, что вот эти активисты, которые тогда столько работали, для того, чтобы переубедить население, они вернутся и продолжат эту работу. Возможно, это будет уже гораздо более плодородная почва. И Луганску нужны эти люди, потому что война только начнется, действительно, именно за умы этих людей. Так что я жду вас всех в Луганске.
And Natalia, we ourselves, when we travel to the front line, when we talk to the female fighters, and both male, there are very different attitudes. Some people treat female in the front line very seriously. Some still thinking about them like somebody who's to take care. So really, it's very different. But how is it for you, while lobbying for all this law, to talk to these senior officials in the Ministry of Defense? They've written this, but how serious are they about, giving the real equal treatment to the females and officers as somebody who can run the command position?
Oh, I hope they are serious. And if they are not, there are people who will keep watching on them, and people and organizations who will keep watching on them. And well, I can tell from my experience, and even from my personal experience, because I am a wife of a military. My husband is a colonel, so I thought I know how to talk to the people in the military uniform. But I remember my first meetings with them, and they were hard. They were very, very challenging. I think in individual meetings, well, they all understand the importance of equality in any sector, including security and defense sector. But there are still strong stereotypes in Ukrainian army, gender stereotypes, and with just one order, we cannot really fight them. That's why we do think that there should be systematic approach. There should be certain structures in the ministry, formal and informal, in the Ministry of Defense that will be taking care of gender equality in security and defense sector. The good news, the optimistic news, is that there are such instruments in the Ministry of Defense. One of them is that they recently established a position of gender advisor to the minister. And we are hoping, this is a new position, and there is a new person who is a military, who is from the system. She's working on this position. And we hope that this new development will give the result. And also another news is that there is a gender working group established in the ministry, and civil society activists were invited recently to join the group. So I also hope the work of that this will give positive results, and this will promote sustainability for gender equality work in security and defense sector.
Well, Natalia, thanks for joining us tonight and taking time to talk.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will rejoin you in 1 second after a very brief break. So I want to thank you for taking the time to watch our show tonight. I want to remind you that you can stay in touch with Hromadske at our website, hromadske.ua, and you can stay in touch with the Kyiv Post, our website, www.kyivpost.com. Have a great week. If you're American, happy 4th of July tomorrow, and good night.
And I would say goodbye from myself, but before we leave, we also would like to show you some of our old video. We were speaking about the escalation this week, so not just Ukraine, that was mentioned outside of Ukraine, that one of the people who had died this day was the person who was an opera singer in Paris, the Ukrainian who joined the army, Vasil Slipak, and there is a mourning after his death, and we have found our own report Hromadske has done previously. So with that old interview of somebody who is not with us any longer, we're finishing the program, and see you in a week.
У 1994 році я виграв конкурс в такому місті Клермон-Ферран у Франції, де я дістав приз, гран-прі, і після цього я приїжджав регулярно у Францію, там співав на концертах, на фестивалях, і в 96-му році директор фестивалю запропонував залишитися у Франції. І така випадковість сталося, що я залишився там на 19 років вже. Насправді, чому ДУК? Бо вони були наші такі перші, ми їх називаємо похресники для нашої волонтерської організації. Ось, і через такий особистий контакт ми допомагали вже з лютого місяця їм. І так сталося, що я цих людей знав, і тому я тут. Волонтерство, воно якби природньо переростає в участь активно. Для мене це було дуже важливо особисто.
А у тебе проблем не буде во Франції, коли ти повернешся, ти зараз з оружием в руках?
Ну, звичайно, що я не можу сказати, що проблем не може бути 100%, бо все ж таки служби Франції працюють досить ефективно, і, звичайно, людина, яка приїхала з України, буде мати якийсь інтерес, звичайно, з їхньої сторони, думаю, персони. Ось то, ну, це вже ми домовимося. Бо загальновідома така дружба франко-російська, ось, і їм дуже важко зараз переключитися на розуміння того, що Україна – це реально Європа, і вона є незалежний гравець зараз, особливо після Майдану, я думаю, визнання України як країни. Причому Франція, офіційно позиція Франції, вона діаметрально є протилежна, тобто вона реально визнала, що анексія Криму була незаконною і кримінальною. Тобто всі санкції, які зараз проти Росії, Франції, вони є в силі. Тобто якась така неузгодженість, так? Ось, так що Франція, така якась досить поділена. Я скажу, більший відсоток людей все ж таки не розуміють, що зараз діється в Україні. Вони не мають достатньо інформації через те, що медіа французькі в своїй максимальній більшості все ж таки або не висвітлюють зовсім події, або мають таку якусь досить чітку проросійську лінію. Просто зверніться там, послухайте там будь-кого на вулиці, там, не знаю, і він скаже, що треба робити. Тобто у нас народ дуже мудрий. Тому я бачу Україну дуже успішною державою. Думаю, досить вагомим гравцем на політичній арені також, якщо ми послухаємо себе самих, тобто народ.
Місяць на небі, зіроньки сяють, тихо по морю човен пливе. В човні дівчина пісню співає, а козак чує, серденько мре. В човні дівчина пісню співає, а козак чує, серденько мре.